I'd like to call to order the May 5th, 2022 Board of Adjustment meeting. Could I get a roll call, please?
Yes, Aletsky.
Present.
Kays.
Yep.
Frank.
Here.
Culhane.
Here.
Dolly.
Here.
And Hanson, Dargis Johnson, Spire, and Ford are absent, but we do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you for that. Third item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the March 24th meeting. Can I get a motion and a second?
Motion to approve.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion?
As a Roberts expert, Todd, am I allowed to vote on it when I wasn't here or not?
I would abstain normally, just my own personal
Does that
preference.
ruin our quorum for that? I mean,
No,
I don't want to
not-
make a big deal out of
To-
I just always noticed that you always abstain on that.
To approve minutes is just a simple majority of those
Yeah.
present.
Yep. So is Culhane abstaining?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good.
All right, thank you.
Get that for the minutes, for the next minutes.
Could I get or all in favor of the minutes, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Fourth item on the agenda is our regular agenda. 4A is board consideration of a variance in the Gateway Overlay District. Brandy, will you take over, please?
Yes, thank you, Jeff. So this application is for a variance request out in the East Park Edition. We've seen multiple similar applications come forward in the recent future as that development is progressing. So this particular location, and I have the zoning pulled up here, I'll turn that off because it gets a little cluttered. The address will be 2702 8th Avenue Southeast, and it is zoned C3 Highway Commercial with the Gateway Overlay District as well. And so this location is proposed to be a clinic, and they are asking for a variance to the 10-foot transitional yard on the side yards. This property does have double frontage on 8th Avenue and 9th Avenue, and then the two, the east and west sides are the side yards, where in the Gateway Overlay District, we have that requirement that they remain 10 feet of grassed area with no allowance for parking or screening or anything of that sort. So what they are requesting is a 5-foot transitional yard, and I'll pull up the site plan here. And that is something too that we have been working towards getting the Gateway Overlay District amended to change this, as this has been a recurring variance. And the idea that each lot would provide for a 5-foot transitional yard. There would be 10 feet in between, which is sufficient for still allowing for division of the parking lots, and then also the green space aspect for drainage, runoff, and aesthetics. So this is where we're at though today, as it's still a requirement in the Gateway Overlay. Just one thing to point out with the site plan and looking at the parking lot as well, the parking lot is meeting minimum requirements to have the 90-degree parking, and you can see that, well, on the east side, they will only be encroaching within 12% of that transitional yard. Otherwise, really, it'll be retained or maintained the rest of the side yard length, as they have the 20-foot structure setback. And then on the west side, there is 40% of it will be encroached upon with the required width to have the driving aisle. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions. One more thing is that the parking stall requirement, they are meeting that for our recently adopted parking ordinance. And so it requires 38, and they are showing 45 spaces. So they are exceeding that. So now with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
I got a question. Okay, now on the west side, is that owned by Travs, that west on the legal description, the west 65 feet, is that owned by Travs Outfitter?
Yep.
Okay, and then on the east side, who owns that?
Coho is still the owner of that.
Why didn't they buy that part?
I think I'll try to answer. I think when we originally platted this, we platted that as 4 lots, and then when that first lot was sold for Travs, they bought a lot plus a little extra. So now this one's buying the rest of that lot, or so those lot lines aren't officially platted lot lines. So, I mean, that little, what looks like a little portion will get absorbed with a future development. Yep.
Mr. Chair. Brandy, so with Trav's encroachment on that lot to the west, there is a 5-foot space there presently of grass space, more than 5?
It appears to be more than 5.
Okay. And then the variance on the east side, would it only apply to the encroachment of that, or would it run the full length of the property?
It could be that it wouldn't, you could do a threshold of what percentage it could be encroached upon.
So the motion could be to approve variances of 5 feet on the west and the 5 feet on the east as shown as the site plan? And then- Okay.
Brandy, I assume all landowners were notified. Did anyone respond back with any concerns or?
No, none that I received.
I will open the public hearing. If there is anyone that's here that wishes to speak on behalf or against this item, please feel free to step up to the mic and state your name for the record.
I'll say something, yeah. Where's the mic?
Right here, and then we'll pull up a chair. Thanks, Mitch. And then state your name for the record.
Sure. Yeah, hi. Colin Palmquist, I'm the owner of this property here. I bought 50,000 square feet here. My intention is to put a freestanding dental clinic with basically, as you guys have shown, with a west entrance and then an east entrance. And the big reason for the two entrances like this are we see a fair amount of elderly patients, public transport. They come through with a bus. They're handicapped. They've got walkers. We see special needs from HSA. So they have, they need a little bit more room, I guess, when you come in through a drive and things like that. And that's the reason you see that circle about that goes towards the south. Everything is pretty much handicap accessible. The exit entry on the north, the one that's on the west. It just seems like it's really it's far better than the facility I have now. And we have a real problem with handicap accessible, doing dental work on handicap individuals and special needs people. They need something, a more specialized clinic like this. And this is just a great flow for it. And we're pretty excited about it. So, yeah. So that's all I got to say. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Anyone have any questions for the applicant? Okay. Anyone else from the public wish to speak on this item? Hearing none, I will close the public hearing and ask for a motion and a second.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to move passage of the variance request for the 5-foot transitional yard on the west side and the 5 foot of the transitional yard adjacent to the parking area on the east side.
Second, Colleen.
All right, we have a motion and a second to essentially approve the variance as shown in the site plan, if I'm getting that correctly. Is there any further discussion from any of the board members?
You want to make any findings or anything, or talk about, we've made this variance now like 3 or 4 times.
I think that's a really good point,
that-
Liam. That is consistent with previous decisions, and we are patiently awaiting a change to the ordinance.
Thank you. And since we need 5 and we only have 4 here, I will do a roll call vote. So, Brandy, would you please do a roll call?
Yes. Dolly.
Yes.
Oletsky.
Yes.
Kays.
Yes.
Brink.
Yes.
Colhane.
Yes.
Motion is approved. Moving on the agenda, item 4B is board consideration of a conditional use of a bar in the C1 district. Brandy, will you take over, please?
Yes, thank you, Brink. So this location is at 316 East Kemp, and I'll highlight it here. And so currently, this application is looking to utilize the northwest wing of the building, which is approximately 1,100 square feet, for a bar tavern to implement a bar or tavern use. There are 4 suites within this building, and the other uses, as I've stated in the staff report, includes a hair salon, an office building, and where was my third? A locksmith. So the let's see here, other details to share with you guys. The overall lot size is 7,395 square feet. It's located in the C1 Community Commercial District, which is downtown. And I'll zoom out here so you can kind of see proximity to other locations. This is where the downtown park will be located, and County Fair here. This is where the Ruins project is happening, and then post office. So with that, I'll open it up for any questions.
That, the kids that do gymnastics and stuff, that's right behind that building, correct?
Yes, is it
Up.
this one?
Yep.
Okay.
And Brandy, I assume you sent out letters. Did you hear back from anyone, any adjacent landowners for or against this item?
No, I did not.
Okay. This is a public hearing, I will open the public hearing. If there is anyone that wishes to speak in favor or against this item, please feel free to step up to the mic.
Mark Mandry, owner of Mark's Auto Repair, adjacent to the land that is there. I'm opposed to this because there's not enough parking for the 4 businesses that are going to be there operating a bar and so on and so forth. Because the hair burners, the locksmith, not that he has a lot of vehicles there, and then the other office that's going to be there, we haven't seen anybody yet. But I just feel that there's not enough parking. There's, I believe, 10 spots total with 2 in the street. I think that the stuff that'll go on after hours, the parking in the lot, the broken beer bottles, so on and so forth, that we see quite often. And, you know, people leave a vehicle in my lot the next morning or whatever. It's going to be on them, ticket and tow or whatever it is, but I'm opposed to it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Brandy, as far as the parking requirements in relation to the request, how many parking spots is the bar tavern required to have?
So in the C1 district, parking, off-street parking is exempt. If this were any other district, a bar tavern would require 1 space per 150 square feet. So with the square footage of this suite being 1,100 square feet, 8 spots would be required. And they have 4 adjacent to the building for the off-street parking, and then there are the 3 in the street. So they would be at about 7.
So if we took combining all of the 4 potential uses that are in the building potentially, and this was in another zoning district, how many parking requirements would be there to support?
Well, and
Those
that
other
might
uses.
take a little more calculations, because it would depend on what the square footage of each suite was and then their use. But it's probably fair to say that it's 1 per 250 square feet for those uses too, because we did create some consistencies there.
So as this gets back to the issue I think I had brought up previously when we were talking about the Ruins development and parking in the uptown area, that while we don't have required off-street parking requirements for specific uses in the C1, these types of things just more keep packing on and packing on. And at some point in time, we as a community are going to have to look at, parking that's going to be able to accommodate, the uses that are happening in the uptown. I can understand Mr. Mandry's concerns with vehicles on his property and having to move them around and those types of things. And if the C1 is the only thing that's really saving them at this point from the parking requirement, correct?
Yes.
The question for you, Brandy. The public parking that's currently south of County Fair, that's going away with the new park. Is that correct?
Yep.
Or is there any public parking that's going to be in the new park, or is it just going to be on street?
It will be on street, and then there, this segment of Third has also been vacated, so that on street will also be eliminated. There will be opportunities within this stretch for on street, but then I believe there's a small parking lot in this vicinity as well.
That's going to be for the residents of the ruins.
No,
No?
the Ruins has underground parking.
Okay.
So this will be for park users, events, whatnot.
Thank you. Is there anyone else that's here that wishes to speak in favor or against this item?
Thank you for giving us the opportunity. Lamar Whittemore, pastor of Harvest Baptist Church across from the post office. And our people had signed a letter. There's 22 signatures on here that says, "We, the congregation of Harvest Baptist Church, are presenting this letter in concerns of an alcohol license being granted for an establishment less than a half a block from our facility." We're just to the east of Mark's facility, just across the street there on 4th. We do not believe having an establishment in such close proximity to a religious establishment and residential area will help promote the family-friendly atmosphere of our community or the safety of our children. There are numerous buildings available throughout our wonderful city in which a business owner can facilitate such a business without it being in such close proximity to a religious establishment or residential neighborhood. Thank you for taking time to take our concerns in consideration in your ruling to grant or deny licensing as an establishment to the sale of alcohol in our neighborhood. And so our people they had some concerns there. I have a young man with me. He runs alcohol recovery ministry in our church building, and the people that attend that, were very concerned about that also, and those things of that nature. And then I live next door, and when everything begins to shut down at night, as Mark was mentioning, we get woken up many times, even from the ones that are downtown, from Bar Street. But so that would not add to the, quietness of the neighborhood, to say at least, if somebody's walking home and they're walking up our alley and hollering at each other. And that still happens already. And so I don't think it would be help our residential area at all, as far as that is concerned. I know it's technically commercial, but it's within a half a block of, residents. And that really concerns me. If, we'll have 35 children at church tonight. And so what if that, and those opportunities being closer proximity to them is concerning.
Brandy, I know Matt's not here, but when it comes to, we as the board are approving the location. The license itself would be approved by the city council for the malt beverage license, I'm guessing is what they're looking for. Are there separation distances in that malt beverage licensing? I know from schools and daycares and those types of things. Is there anything from churches?
So here I pulled up that, I knew that that's where you guys would be going with the next question. So for the location, this is under the alcoholic beverage ordinance. And so if the premises are within, I'll just highlight this here, are within 100 yards measured by a regular and usual path of travel from any door or exit of any church, school, boys or girls club, church or community-sponsored recreation center, provided, however, that this restriction shall not apply when any church, school, boys or girls club, or community-sponsored recreation center is located in the C1 commercial district or the C3 commercial district, or the business authorized by such license has been continually so authorized at the same location from a time prior to establishment of one organizations mentioned herein.
So the rule doesn't apply to the C1 as well?
Right.
What about that new park that's going to be across the street?
The same
That
category,
applies for that too?
except parks actually aren't even in this list.
Well, you could categorize that the uptown park is, downtown park as a community-sponsored recreation area too. I mean, if somebody wanted to make that determination.
Yeah.
So the question becomes, outside the C1 area where parking and or proximity to churches and schools, bars can be anywhere.
Is the door of the bar and the door of the church within 100 yards of each other? Brandy will measure it for us or approximately measure it.
And let's just say that the door is here. Is there a door on the west side?
It's right across from the post office there.
Okay. So about
300 feet.
yep.
Pretty close to
Two-
100 yards.
Yeah.
And it's a
Where
stone's
does the
throw away
C1
from,
district end down there, Brandy?
It is the block over. But that would also apply for the C3. And it's not saying, it's still, the conditional use is still reviewed by the Board of Adjustment. So just because of that application of the location in Title 2, that doesn't,
well, we can't preclude you, we can't base our decision on proximity to a church if it's not
No.
allowed in there. So that cannot be used for a basis for a findings for a denial.
right, yeah. There could,
So the question still gets back to, where I'm struggling here is that I'm a firm believer that if we have a use listed in a specific zoning district as a conditional use, the preponderance is that it needs to be approved unless there's something, tragically flawed with the request. And being that we can't apply parking requirements or proximity to recreation and religious facilities as a basis for denial, I don't know how we can not approve it. And that's where I'm at.
We can listen to the neighbors.
Does this site have refuse or areas for garbage or any of those other lists that are in, lighting needs or anything that'll be changing with this request, I guess?
no, and so from the application that was submitted, you can see that the ingress egress existing off-street, existing with 4 spaces along the building and 3 more on-street. That's the refuse and service areas are existing, utilities existing. There won't be additional screening or buffering. Signs, lighting is existing and signage will be permitted prior to installation. And general compatibility, so required yards and open space, NA, because it's in the C1 district, and then the general compatibility of adjacent properties. All surrounding properties have commercial uses in commercial zoning.
I mean, and that's where I struggle. I mean, it's by its general use, it's generally compatible. Whether it's I'm selling liquor or I'm selling shoes, I'm still selling something, and it's a compatible use when you look at commercial uses as a totality. And so my basis is that if it's listed, there has to be something specifically wrong with that to not allow it. And I don't think general compatibility is a basis for denial, so.
You'd have to come up to the microphone.
And just while he comes up here, for another scenario where this was reversed when there was a church that went into Mahold's hardware store, which is on Broadway in
Right.
proximity to other bars. So it was,
But that was those bars were already in existence.
yeah.
Right, and so really the change was in the church, not in the bars.
Didn't we turn
So
down?
why would-
Oh,
Go ahead.
Okay, didn't we turn down one at the old Ace Hardware building, which is now VA? And I think Steve Thorson wanted to put in a bar in there, and it was turned down because it was across the street from that little church.
That might have been, I don't recall.
Yeah, I mean.
Because maybe before my time, but that could have been.
But my question is, if the only rule is technicalities, then why send out a letter and asking for people's opinions?
Generally, the way I view the impact of individuals when they're coming in on a conditional use permit is to see if there's anything that you can do to mitigate the request. or mitigate the impact on the neighborhood. When a use is listed in the ordinance, my feeling is that the board and the city council has made the determination that this use generally fits in the specific zoning district, and the purpose of the public hearing is to see if there's anything that can be done to, through conditions to mitigate impacts on the neighborhood. That's my position.
I can promise you, it won't make our neighborhood any better.
Right.
Thank you.
Mark Mandry again, Mark's Auto Repair. For 28 years, I've had to put up with people driving through my parking lot and so on and so forth to get there. My dumpster has always been used by them, so there is no room for a dumpster. The credit union uses it, Vic uses it, the girls use it at the salon. They have no place for refuge, so that's just one thing. But driving through the parking lot and stuff, you know, it's not really conducive, but they've done it for years over there. And yes, I do get uptight, and I've talked to them about it. The only way that I would be able to do this is to put a fence in between the lot line, and then they're going to really be in tough shape because they're not going to have any parking at all.
If there was a restriction on hours of operation, would that make any difference at all to you, Mark?
No, I don't believe so, because, you know, we're going to have beer, and then pretty soon we're going to apply for a video lottery license, and I just think we're just going to have a mess. I mean, you can go uptown after the bars close, and, you know, the illegal parking and so on and so forth. So that's all I've got to say at this time.
Would a fence create a buffer where then they wouldn't be utilizing?
They won't be able to use their parking lot. Because it's a jam in there now, you know, since Doc has taken that building over. I mean, it's a little bit better that he put parking spots and stuff in there, but it's still, I've had many cars backed into, people backing out of there, so I'm gonna have a fence that's knocked over.
Brandy, you said this lot was about 7,800 square feet, is that correct?
Yes, or was it 73?
73, 78. Well, I guess one thing I'm looking at, you know, I tend to agree with Todd that, you know, uses should be allowed, but one thing also, you know, to speak against that is we do have minimum lot sizes, you know, and I know we have, this is an existing lot and it's smaller than that, but, you know, our minimum lot size for C1 is 10,000 square feet.
No.
And I just,
It's 625.
it's not the 10,000 and 21.1003?
No, that was amended a couple years back. I'll pull it up here. Sorry to interrupt you, but I just,
No, that's-
I figured, again, that's where, you're going, because there are a lot of properties. So, and that was, we'll find it.
And that was done because we had so many odd, obscure little ones, and we didn't want to go through the platting aspect of.
Right, and they weren't able to meet the 10,000 because they are, a lot of them were were platted as 25-foot lots, and then with 0 setbacks, we landed with 625.
And it just gets back to the point I was trying to make. I think some of us are conflicted up here that it probably isn't the appropriate place, but by the rule of what's in the law, I just don't know how you get around not issuing the permit. I think we're in a much more tenuous position by denying it.
Todd, your chair. So Oxford defines, and I just looked this up, as compatibility is a state in which two things are able to exist or occur together without problems or conflict. So I understand your position is a really pretty broad definition of compatibility, right? It's two commercial uses, we're selling stuff, there's no problem. Well, I think that's an awfully broad view, especially considering the other kind of issues with this particular exact location. I think you're gonna have conflict with several of the other uses nearby, such that they really can't coexist in their entirety. So that would be my basis for denying this petition, would be that there is going to be conflict. I'm familiar with this particular property. I mean, drive downtown all the time. I walk down this area. It's a unique lot, and although parking isn't required in C1, the way that this particular lot sits is you're going to have a lot of issues with vehicles, and that raises the ingress-egress. Again, you've got a door in and out of it, but you've got cars that are going to be coming in and out, and then also violating Mr. Mandry's property, or potentially creating conflict with Mr. Mandry's use of his property. Then when you've got the church's involvement and now the new downtown park, I just think that we're going to have a conflict or potential conflict at this exact location. Part of the general C1 by its nature, that's why we don't have parking minimums, right? That's why there's a small lot size and there aren't these setback requirements. As a general rule, you might have a bar next to a church, or they might be nearby, right? We've got a lot of different uses. You've got residential uses, you've got commercial uses, you've got religious uses. That's part of the beauty of downtown, but that doesn't mean that every spot is always appropriate for every use that would be defined as commercial. So that's going to be the basis for me not supporting this one.
And I guess you could look at it from the other perspective that, there are 3 other commercial uses going on that property in that small building already. So by not allowing the 4th one to happen, we're not taking any sort of ability to use that property in some sort of fashion that would cause them harm. I mean, they still have other opportunities.
Yeah, and I tend to push back on the parking issue, Mr. Mandry. Like, I understand that everyone's concerned about parking downtown. I think we have plenty of parking downtown. But I think in this particular location, and again, it's not required in this location, but just the way that this building sits, you're going to have problems. I mean, I could foresee people stacking up on Mandry's lot, and then you've got conflict, quite literally conflict, and which then violates that general compatibility. So I'll leave it with that.
Thank you.
Thank you. The public hearing is still open. Is there anyone else that wishes to speak in favor or against this item?
Bradley Seaton, director of Set Free Ministries. It is a drug and alcohol addiction ministry that we do operate out of Harvest Baptist Church. And I have individuals in my class that struggle with alcohol. If they want to drink, they can come uptown, a little bit further up the street. But what would it be saying to those who are trying to get rid of that out of their life to come to a ministry, a class, set and hear that how to abstain from alcohol, and then to walk right out the door, right out the church door, and look, and there's the bar light on? What are you saying to them? Your life don't matter. Your families don't matter. In other words, we're just simply saying, just because you're a church, you're nothing. A refuge, a place that somebody and everybody should feel free in, should feel that safety. And working with these individuals, I can name them off, but what they have gone through and their families have suffered from, it wouldn't be a bit of difference as someone to say, you know what, the drug dealer can go stand on your street corner right there to church and deal as your people's coming out. The only difference is it's legalized. Both destroy homes. Both destroy families. And the only ones that get anything from it is those that's dealing it out. But those that are receiving it are losing it. But thank you for allowing this opportunity.
Thank you for those comments. Is anyone else here with us or in the audience that wishes to speak on this item? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and ask for a motion and a second.
Motion to approve.
I'd second for discussion purposes.
We have a motion and a second.
Minute, Chair.
Go ahead.
Again, I don't plan on supporting this particular conditional use. I want to say several things. First is, again, you know, one of the beautiful things about our downtown is that there's a lot of different uses and a lot of different things are allowed. But when you look at the requirement H, it deals with general compatibility with adjacent properties, specifically adjacent properties like Mr. Mandry's property. And I foresee the potential of a conflict, as I discussed. Because what happens is, all right, we approve this, then all of a sudden Mandry puts up a fence, or we put a conditional use that says you got to put a fence up. All of a sudden you then create a problem with ingress and egress. Although parking is not a requirement, there's certainly, it exacerbates the problem because the nature of that lot seems to promote parking off-street, even though it's not required. And so you end up with a pretty big mess. Again, as it deals with the refuse, I didn't mention that earlier, but I'm not aware of any dumpster or anything like that. It doesn't look like. And if the plan is to just use Mr. Mandry's dumpster, again, you become, it creates the issue for potential conflict. Again, bringing us back to H, subpart H with the general compatibility. So even if you do put a dumpster in there. So that's going to be the reason for me not supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and I also have a qualm with bullet E, you know, screening. I mean, I think if something like this were to go, there should be some sort of screening. And I mean, there's not really a way or a path to put up, you know, a fence through a parking lot or a set of trees. I mean, that's just not practical. So I agree with your assessment of items C and H, but I also think E fits in there as well as an issue.
I'm still on the fence on this. I think I can agree with the refuse and the screening. However, when we have specific rules in the alcohol licensing that says that it doesn't apply to churches and schools in the uptown area, I think that section of the code intimates that this is generally compatible from a use perspective. And so based upon that aspect, I would support the general compatibility because it's also referenced more specifically in other areas of the code. And that's where I'm going to end up having to vote, even though I'm reluctantly not wanting to do it.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board members? Hearing none, I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Okay, Aletsky.
No.
Kays.
Yes.
Colhane.
No.
Dolly.
Yes.
Brink.
No. The vote of 2 to 3, the motion fails. Moving on to item 5, open public comment. Was there any public comment received, Brandy?
Nope.
Okay. I'll move on to item 6. Do we have any new business?
None that I have.
Item 7, do we have any old business?
Again, none that I have.
All right, I'll look for a motion to adjourn.
Make that motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. We are adjourned.